Ambassador Lyris Velthan stood at the window of the transport ship and watched the dead planet grow larger. HFY War was brown and gray, covered in dust storms that had been raging for 10,000 years. Nothing lived there anymore. Nothing had lived there since the precursors destroyed themselves in a war that nobody remembered. But beneath the surface, there was a vault. And inside that vault was knowledge that every species in the galaxy wanted. Lyris was ethery. Her body was made of living crystal, pale blue and beautiful, nearly impossible to break. She had lived for 40,000 years. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had watched young species crawl out of their oceans and reach for the stars. The ethery were among the oldest races in the known universe, and they considered themselves above the petty concerns of younger species. When the Galactic Council told her that a human would be her security detail for this mission, she almost refused to go. Humans were new. They had only been in space for 300 years. Their bodies were soft, made of meat and blood and bone. They lived for less than a century, sometimes less than that if they were not careful. The ethery called them spark lives because they burned so briefly before going dark. What could a human possibly protect her from? The transport ship landed on a platform that the survey team had built 3 weeks earlier. Wind howled outside, throwing dust against the windows. Lyris pulled her environmental cloak tighter and stepped out into the storm. A Todd human was waiting for her dot. He was tall for his species, with dark skin and short black hair. He wore combat armor that looked like it had seen many battles. There were scars on his hands and one across his jaw. His eyes moved constantly, checking the horizon, the buildings, the shadows between the equipment containers. "Ambassador Velthan," he said. His voice was calm and steady. "I'm Sergeant Marcus Cole. I'll be keeping you alive down there." Lyris looked at him the way she might look at a child who had said something foolish. "I have survived for 40,000 years, Sergeant. I do not think I need a human to protect me." Marcus did not seem offended. He simply nodded and said, "With respect, Ambassador, you've never been inside a precursor vault." "I have, twice." This surprised her. Precursor vaults were rare, and the traps inside them killed most who entered. "You survived 2 expeditions?" "Barely." He touched the scar on his jaw. "Lost good people both times. But we learned things." "I learned things." He gestured toward the entrance that led underground. The precursors were afraid of something. Whatever killed them, they wanted to make sure nobody else could find their secrets. The vaults are designed to kill anyone who gets too confident. Lyris did not respond. She walked past him toward the base camp, and Marcus followed 3 steps behind. Over the next 2 days, they prepared for the descent. The vault was 3 kilometers beneath the surface, accessible only through a series of tunnels that the survey team had carefully mapped. Lyris studied the precursor language, translating the warnings that were carved into the stone walls. Most of them said the same thing. "Turn back. Death waits below. The knowledge is not worth your life." She ignored them. The ethery had not become the oldest species in the galaxy by being afraid. Marcus spent those 2 days checking equipment. He tested every light, every rope, every weapon. He made Lyris memorize 3 different escape routes from every section of the tunnel system. When she complained that this was unnecessary, he looked at her with those steady dark eyes and said, "The universe doesn't care if you're careful, Ambassador. It only cares if you're ready." She found his attitude exhausting. The ethery planned in centuries. They considered possibilities that other species could not even imagine. But humans planned for disaster because disaster came for them so often. Their short lives had taught them that anything could go wrong at any moment. On the morning of the 3rd day, they began their descent. The tunnels were cold and dark. Lyris could see in wavelengths that humans could not, but even she found the darkness oppressive. The walls were covered in precursor symbols that warned of death and destruction. Some of them still glowed with faint power after 10,000 years. Marcus moved differently underground. On the surface, he had been professional but relaxed. Down here, he was something else entirely. Every step was careful and measured. His hand never left his weapon. He checked every corner, tested every floor tile, examined every shadow before they moved forward. "You are very paranoid," Lyris said, after watching him spend 10 minutes examining a doorway. "I'm still alive," he replied. A lot of people who weren't paranoid are not. They found the first trap on the 4th level. It was hidden beneath a floor tile that looked exactly like all the others. Marcus spotted it because the dust had settled differently in the cracks around its edges. When he triggered it from a safe distance, blades shot out from the walls with enough force to cut through stone. "That would have killed you," he said. Lyris did not respond. Her crystalline body was strong, but those blades might have shattered her completely. They continued deeper. Marcus found 7 more traps over the next 2 days. He disarmed some of them and marked others so they could avoid them. He did not sleep much. Every time Lyris woke from her rest period, she found him awake, watching the darkness. "Your species needs sleep," she said on the 6th day. "You will make mistakes if you are tired." Marcus shook his head. "I'll sleep when you're safe on the surface. Down here, tired is better than dead." She did not understand him. His life was so short already. Why was he so determined to risk it for someone he barely knew? The E3 valued their long lives above almost everything else. They did not take risks. They did not sacrifice themselves for strangers. But Marcus Cole acted as if her survival was more important than his own. And she could not understand why. On the 7th day, they reached the central archive. The chamber was enormous, its ceiling lost in darkness above them. The walls were covered in precursor script that hummed with power even after 10 millennia. In the center of the room, on a pedestal made of black stone, sat the data core they had come to find. It pulsed with amber light. Calling to her, Lyris took a step toward it. And Marcus grabbed her arm. "Wait," he said. "We have come all this way. The core is right there. That's what worries me." His eyes were scanning the room, looking for dangers she could not see. The precursors wouldn't leave something this important unguarded. "There are more traps here. I can feel it." Lyris wanted to argue, but something in his voice made her stop. She had dismissed him as a fragile human who could not possibly understand the dangers they faced. But he had kept her alive for 7 days in a place designed to kill. Perhaps it was time to listen. "What do you suggest?" she asked. Marcus began his examination of the room, and Lyris watched him work, not knowing that in less than an hour, everything would change forever. Marcus Cole moved through the central archive like a ghost. His footsteps made no sound. His eyes missed nothing. Lyris watched him examine every shadow, every crack in the ancient walls. She had thought him paranoid before. Now she saw something else. He was not paranoid. He was experienced. He had seen what happened to people who were not careful in places like this. The chamber was larger than anything they had found in the upper levels. The ceiling rose so high that Lyris could not see it even with her enhanced vision. The walls were covered in precursor writing, thousands of lines of text that glowed with soft blue light. In the center of the room, the data core waited on its pedestal, pulsing like a heartbeat. Lyris wanted to walk straight to it and take it. The mission would be complete. She could return to the surface, return to the council, return to her comfortable life among the stars. But Marcus had told her to wait, and something in his voice had made her listen. He spent an hour examining the room. She watched him mark locations on a small device he carried, building a map of dangers that she could not see. When he finally returned to her side, His face was grim. "I found 14 traps," he said. "Pressure plates, motion sensors, proximity fields. Some of them are 10,000 years old, but they're still active. The precursors built things to last. Can you disarm them?" "Some of them. 12 are simple enough. The other 2 are too complex. If I try to disable them, I might trigger them instead." Lyris looked at the data core. It was so close. "What do you suggest?" Marcus pointed to the eastern side of the room. "There's a path from that direction that avoids both of the complex traps. We approach from there, extract the core, and leave the same way. It's the only safe approach. And the other traps? I'll disarm them first. It will take time, but it's better than dying." Lyris nodded. She was not used to being patient. The Aetheri lived forever, but they were not patient. They were simply careful. They calculated risks and avoided anything that might threaten their long lives. But this kind of patience, this slow and careful work in the face of immediate danger, was something different. Marcus began disarming the traps one by one. He worked with steady hands and calm focus. Each trap took between 5 and 15 minutes. Some of them required delicate tools. Others required nothing more than a careful touch in exactly the right place. He explained what he was doing as he worked, teaching her how to recognize the signs of precursor defenses. "They thought of everything," he said while disabling a pressure plate near the western wall. "Every stone could be a trigger. Every shadow could hide a blade. They wanted their secrets to stay buried." "Why would they do this?" Lyris asked. "If they wanted to preserve their knowledge, why make it so dangerous to retrieve?" Marcus shrugged. "Fear, probably. They were dying, and they knew it. Whatever destroyed them, they wanted to make sure it couldn't get their technology. So they made the vaults into tombs. Anyone who came looking for their secrets would die with them. That seems wasteful. That's one way to look at it." He finished with the pressure plate and moved to the next trap. "Another way is that they loved their knowledge so much they couldn't bear to let it fall into the wrong hands. They'd rather destroy everyone who came looking than risk their legacy being used for evil." Lyris considered this. The Aetheri preserved everything. They had libraries that stretched for kilometers, filled with the collected wisdom of 40,000 years. The idea of deliberately destroying knowledge was alien to her, but she understood the fear that drove it. The precursors had built weapons that could crack planets and poison stars. They had good reasons to be afraid of their own creations. 3 hours passed. Marcus disarmed 11 traps and moved to the 12th. Lyris found herself watching his hands as he worked. They were scarred and rough, nothing like her smooth crystalline fingers. But they moved with precision and care. He treated every trap with respect, knowing that a single mistake would kill them both. "You are very good at this," she said. Marcus smiled without looking up. "Lots of practice." "Too much practice. How many expeditions have you been on?" 7. 2 of them were precursor vaults. His smile faded. "Lost friends on every one. Good people who made one mistake or got unlucky or trusted the wrong piece of ground. That must be difficult." "It is." He finished with the trap and stood up, stretching his back. "But someone has to do it. Someone has to go into the dark places and bring back what we find. If we don't, the wrong people will." The wrong people. Lyris knew who he meant. The Vorn hegemony had been racing to find precursor technology for decades. They were a warrior species, aggressive and expansionist. If they found the weapons the precursors had built, they would use them. Billions would die. "One more trap," Marcus said. Then we approached from the east. He moved to the final device, a complex mechanism hidden behind a support column near the pedestal. Lyris watched him work for a few minutes, then found her attention drifting. The chamber was fascinating. So much precursor writing, so much history waiting to be translated. She walked slowly around the room, reading what she could, careful to stay away from the areas Marcus had marked as dangerous. That was when she saw it, behind a different support column. On the opposite side of the room from where Marcus was working, there was a secondary data node. It was smaller than the main core, half hidden in shadow, easy to miss if you were not looking carefully. But Lyris had spent centuries studying precursor technology. She recognized it immediately. A secondary node would contain supplementary data, research notes, context for the main archive. It might be the key to understanding everything in the primary core. She looked at Marcus. He was focused on the trap, his back to her. She looked at the secondary node. It was only a few meters away. She could retrieve it quickly and return before he even noticed she had moved. The E3 were not impulsive. They calculated risks and made careful decisions based on centuries of experience. But Lyris had been in this vault for 7 days. She was tired of being careful. She was tired of moving slowly. The secondary node was right there, and she wanted it. She took a step toward it, then another. Marcus had told her to stay in the areas he had cleared. He had told her that every stone could be a trap. He had told her that confidence killed more people than ignorance in places like this. She did not listen. Her foot came down on a floor tile that looked exactly like all the others. She felt it shift slightly beneath her weight. She heard a soft click, gentle and almost musical. And then the world turned to light and sound and terror. "Ambassador, don't move!" Marcus shouted, but he was already moving, already running toward her. His eyes had gone wide with fear, not for himself, but for her. The floor around her began to glow. Symbols appeared in the stone, racing outward in all directions. She heard machinery activating deep beneath the chamber. Things that had been waiting for 10,000 years, finally waking up. She had triggered the trap, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The trap activated in 3 stages. Lyris understood this in the cold, clear way that comes only when death is certain. Her mind, trained by 40,000 years of study, analyzed what was happening, even as her body froze in terror. Stage 1 was the containment field. A wall of shimmering energy began to rise from the glowing symbols on the floor. It curved inward as it climbed, forming a dome that would seal her inside. The field was already waist-high and growing fast. In a few seconds, it would close over her head, and she would be trapped. Stage 2 was the collector. She heard grinding sounds from above and looked up to see crystalline spikes descending from the darkness of the ceiling. There were dozens of them, each one as long as her arm and sharp enough to pierce stone. They were designed to harvest biological material from intruders, to pin them in place while the 3rd stage activated. Stage 3 was the purge. She could feel the energy building beneath the floor, a vibration that grew stronger with every heartbeat. The purge would release a wave of disintegrating force that would reduce everything inside the containment field to atoms. Nothing would survive. Not flesh, not bone, not even E3 crystal. 4 seconds. She had perhaps 4 seconds before the containment field sealed. A crystalline body could regenerate from almost any injury. She could survive damage that would kill most species instantly. But she could not survive disintegration. She could not come back from nothing. 40,000 years of life. All of it ending here, in this dark chamber, because she had been impatient. Because she had not listened to the human who had told her to be careful. Marcus Cole was running. She saw him in the corner of her vision, saw him drop his tools and sprint toward her. His face was twisted with effort, his legs pumping as fast as they could carry him. The containment field was at her chest now. In 2 seconds, it would close over her head. In 30 seconds after that, the purge would activate. He was not going to make it. Even if he reached her, Even if he somehow pulled her out of the field before it sealed, they would both be killed by the collector spikes descending from above. "Run!" She screamed at him. "Get out of here!" He did not run. He did not slow down. He hit her at full speed, wrapping his arms around her crystalline body and throwing them both toward the edge of the containment field. They almost made it. The field sealed. Just as they reached the boundary, Marcus's right side cleared the barrier. His left side did not. The shimmering wall of energy cut across his body, trapping his arm and leg and part of his torso inside the death zone. He screamed. It was a terrible sound, full of pain and fear and desperate determination. But he did not let go of her. His arms were still wrapped around Lyris, pushing her further out, keeping her crystalline form clear of the field's edge. The collector spikes descended. 3 of them punched through his body. 1 through his shoulder, shattering bone and tearing muscle. 1 through his ribs, scraping against his lung. 1 through his thigh, pinning him to the ancient stone floor. Blood sprayed across the ground, red and bright against the gray. Marcus screamed again, but still, he did not let go. His hands gripped her arms, pushing her away from the barrier with the last of his strength. "Go," he gasped. His voice was wet with blood. "The purge. 30 seconds. You have to go." Lyris stared at him. The left side of his body was inside the containment field, impaled by crystalline spikes. Blood was pooling beneath him, spreading across the floor in a dark red flood. He was dying. He had perhaps a minute before blood loss killed him, and long before that. The purge would disintegrate everything inside the field, including the parts of him that were trapped. "I can't leave you," she said. "You have to." He coughed, and blood came with it. "Someone has to tell him what's here. Someone has to warn the council about the Vorn. Someone has to live." His eyes met hers, and she saw something she did not understand. Peace. Acceptance. "Please, let me do this. Let me save you." He was willing to die for her. This human, this spark life who had known her for only 7 days, was willing to sacrifice his brief existence so that she could live. He did not hesitate. He did not calculate the odds or weigh the benefits. He simply acted, throwing himself into certain death because he believed her survival mattered more than his own. Lyris had lived for 40,000 years. She had witnessed countless sacrifices, countless acts of heroism and cowardice, but she had never understood them. The Aetheri valued their long lives above all else. They did not take risks. They did not throw themselves into danger for others. She understood now. She understood that some things were worth dying for. She understood that love and duty and honor were not just words, but forces as powerful as gravity. She understood that this human, this fragile creature made of meat and blood and bone, had a strength that she had never possessed, and she understood that she could not let him die alone. "No," she said. Marcus stared at her. "What?" I said no. She grabbed the nearest collector spike, the one that had pierced his shoulder. Her crystalline hands were not made for this kind of work. They were designed for delicate manipulation, for writing and art and diplomacy. But she gripped the spike and pulled. The spike did not move. It was anchored in the ceiling by machinery that had been running for 10,000 years. Lyris pulled harder. She felt her crystal beginning to crack, fractures spreading up her arms from the strain. She did not stop. She braced her feet against the floor and threw every bit of strength she possessed into one desperate attempt. The spike tore free from Marcus's shoulder. He screamed, fresh blood pouring from the wound, but the spike was out. She threw it aside and grabbed the next one. "What are you doing?" Marcus gasped. "You have to run. The purge is coming. Then I will be fast." She pulled the second spike from his ribs. More cracks spread through her hands, her arms, her shoulders. The pain was intense, but she ignored it. Pain was temporary. Death was forever. 20 seconds to purge. She grabbed the third spike, the one in his thigh. This one was deeper, anchored in the stone floor beneath him. She could not get a good grip. Her hands were too damaged. Her crystal too fractured. She tried anyway. 10 seconds to purge. The spike finally tore free. Marcus howled in agony, but he was free of the collector. Lyris grabbed him and pulled with everything she had left. He slid across the floor, leaving a trail of blood behind him. Until finally, his entire body was outside the containment field. 5 seconds to purge. Lyris threw herself over Marcus, covering his body with her own. Her crystalline form was dense and strong, designed to withstand forces that would crush most materials. She did not know if it would protect him from the purge's shockwave. She did not know if they would survive, but she was not going to let him die alone. The purge-activated light filled the chamber, brighter than any sun. Sound followed, a roar that shook the walls and cracked the ceiling. Lyris felt the energy wash over her, felt her crystal vibrating at frequencies that threatened to shatter her completely. And then it was over. The light faded. The sound died. The containment field collapsed, its purpose fulfilled. Everything inside had been reduced to atoms. The data core was gone. The secondary node was gone. 10,000 years of precursor knowledge, destroyed in an instant. But Marcus Cole was still breathing. He was barely conscious, his body broken and bleeding, but he was alive. Lyris had saved him. Somehow, against all odds, she had saved him. She looked at her hands. They were ruined, cracked, and fractured beyond recognition. The damage spread all the way to her shoulders. It would take years to fully heal. She did not care. Marcus opened his eyes and looked up at her. His face was pale from blood loss, his breathing shallow and weak. But he smiled. "You were supposed to run," he whispered. "I was," she agreed. "But I chose not to. I chose to save you instead." He laughed weakly, and then he passed out from the pain. Lyris held him close and waited for rescue, understanding for the first time what it truly meant to be human. The extraction team arrived 2 hours later. Lyris heard them calling through the tunnels, their voices echoing in the darkness. She tried to respond, but her voice was weak. The damage to her crystalline body had spread further than she realized. Speaking took effort. She did not have Marcus had not woken up since passing out. His breathing was shallow and irregular. The pool of blood beneath him had grown large enough to touch the walls of the chamber. She had torn strips from her environmental cloak and used them to bandage his wounds as best she could. But she knew it was not enough. He needed real medical care, and he needed it soon. She held him in her arms and waited. She counted his heartbeats, each one fainter than the last. She prayed to gods. She did not believe in that help would arrive before his heart stopped. The extraction team found them sitting in the middle of the destroyed chamber. Lyris was covered in Marcus's blood, her crystalline arms cracked and broken, her eyes fixed on his face. She looked up when the lights appeared, and for a moment she could not speak. "Help him," she finally managed. "Please, help him." The medical technicians rushed forward. They were a mixed team, humans and Aetheri and other species, all trained for emergency situations. They surrounded Marcus, checking his vitals, applying emergency treatment, preparing him for transport. One of them looked at Lyris with concern. "Ambassador, your injuries are severe. We need to treat you as well." "After him," she said. "He goes first." The technician hesitated. Lyris was the mission leader, the senior diplomat, the 40,000-year-old ambassador who was supposed to be in charge. But the look in her eyes left no room for argument. "Yes, Ambassador," the technician said, and turned back to Marcus. They carried him out of the vault on a stretcher. Lyris walked beside him, one cracked hand resting on his chest so she could feel his heartbeat. It was weak, but it was there. He was still fighting. After everything he had been through, he was still fighting to live. The journey to the surface took 3 hours. Lyris refused to rest, refused treatment, refused to leave Marcus's side even for a moment. The other members of the team watched her with confusion. The Aetheri were known for their emotional distance, their careful calculation of risk and reward. They did not form attachments to short-lived species. They did not sacrifice themselves for others. But Lyris had changed. She could feel it in her crystal, in the cracks that ran through her body, in the way she looked at the unconscious human beside her. She had been alive for 40,000 years, and she had never understood what it meant to truly care about another being until now. Marcus was rushed into surgery the moment they reached the surface base. Lyris was taken to a different medical bay, where technicians began the long process of repairing her crystalline form. She barely noticed. Her mind was in the other room, with the human who had saved her life. 3 days passed. The repairs to her hands were complete on the second day. Her arms and shoulders would take longer, but she could function. She could move. And as soon as she was able, she went to see Marcus. He was awake when she entered his room. His body was covered in regeneration patches, white squares of advanced medical technology that were slowly knitting his flesh back together. Tubes connected him to machines that monitored his heart, his lungs, his blood pressure. He looked pale and weak, but his eyes were clear. "Ambassador," he said. His voice was rough, barely more than a whisper. "They told me what you did." Lyris sat in the chair beside his bed. Her repaired hands looked almost normal now, but she could still feel the ghost of the cracks that had spread through them. "I did what was necessary. You almost died." He shook his head slowly. "You should have run. I told you to run. You told me many things, Sergeant Cole. I chose not to listen." He laughed weakly. The sound made him wince, pain flickering across his face. "Yeah, I noticed." They sat in silence for a moment. Outside the window, the dust storms of Kethfire continued to rage. The dead planet did not care that they had almost died beneath its surface. It did not care that the precursor archive was destroyed, or that a human soldier had nearly sacrificed himself for an alien who had dismissed him as insignificant. "Why?" Lyris asked finally. Marcus looked at her. "Why what? Why did you do it? Why did you throw yourself in front of that trap? You knew you would die. You knew there was almost no chance of survival. Why would you give up your life for someone you barely knew?" He was quiet for a long time. His eyes moved to the window, watching the storm outside. When he spoke, his voice was soft but steady. "My grandmother used to tell me stories when I was young. Stories about heroes, about people who did the right thing even when it was hard. She said that humans aren't special because we're strong or smart or live a long time. We're special because we choose what matters." He turned back to look at her. "In that moment, you mattered. That's not complicated. That's just human." Lyris did not understand. She had studied humans for centuries. She had written papers on their psychology, their culture, their strange and inexplicable behaviors. She had observed them from a distance, cataloging their actions without ever truly comprehending their motivations. But Marcus Cole had looked at her, a stranger from an ancient species who had treated him with arrogance and dismissal. And he had decided that her life was worth more than his own. He had made that choice in less than a second, without calculation, without hesitation. "But your life is so short," she said. "You have so few years. Every moment is precious. Why would you waste any of them on someone else?" Marcus smiled. It was a tired smile, worn down by pain and blood loss, but it was genuine. "That's the thing you don't understand about us. Our lives are short, so we have to make them count. We don't have time to be careful all the time. We don't have time to calculate every risk. We have to choose what matters and then fight for it with everything we have." He reached out and took her hand. His skin was warm against her cool crystal, soft where she was hard, fragile where she was strong. But there was a power in his touch that she had never felt before. "You mattered," he said again. "That's all the reason I needed." Lyris felt something shift inside her. A crack, but not a physical one. Something deeper. Something that had been frozen for thousands of years finally beginning to thaw. She had lived for 40,000 years. She had seen civilizations rise and fall, stars be born and die. She had accumulated knowledge and wisdom that most species could not even imagine. But she had never experienced what Marcus Cole had shown her in that dark chamber beneath the surface of a dead world. She had never understood what it meant to truly live. "Thank you," she said. The words felt inadequate, too small for what she was trying to express. But Marcus seemed to understand. He squeezed her hand gently and closed his eyes. "Get some rest, Ambassador," he said. "We both have a lot of healing to do." Lyris stayed by his bedside until he fell asleep. She watched his chest rise and fall, listened to the steady beep of the machines monitoring his heart. He was fragile, this human. He would heal, but the scars would remain. He would carry the marks of this day for the rest of his short life. But he had saved her. And in doing so, he had changed her forever. She finally understood why the universe needed humans. Not for their strength or their intelligence or their technology, but for their hearts, for their willingness to sacrifice everything for what they believed was right. The Aethery had forgotten how to do that. Perhaps they had never known, but Lyris was learning. 6 weeks after the incident at HFY, Lyris Velthan stood before the Galactic Council and delivered her report. The chamber was enormous, built to hold representatives from every major species in known space. Thousands of beings watched as she spoke, their faces ranging from curious to hostile. The Aethery delegation sat in the front row, their crystalline forms glowing with soft blue light. The Vorn hegemony representatives were further back, their armored bodies tense with barely contained aggression. "The primary archive was destroyed," Lyris said. Her voice was calm and clear, carrying across the vast chamber. "The data core is gone, along with all supplementary records. 10,000 years of precursor knowledge lost forever." Murmurs spread through the crowd. The archive had been the most significant find in decades. Its destruction was a catastrophic failure. "However," Lyris continued, "I did not come here today to discuss the archive. I came to discuss something far more important." She paused, letting the silence stretch. The council members leaned forward, curious despite themselves. "I came to discuss humanity." The Aethery delegation shifted uncomfortably. Speaking about younger species in such formal settings was unusual. Speaking positively about them was almost unheard of. Before this mission, I believed that humans were a minor species. Short-lived, impulsive, driven by emotions rather than logic. She smiled slightly. "I was wrong." She told them the story. All of it. Marcus checking every corner, testing every floor. Marcus staying awake so she could sleep. Marcus warning her about the traps, teaching her how to survive. And finally, Marcus throwing himself into certain death to give her a chance to live. He knew he would die, Lyris said. There was no calculation, no weighing of benefits and risks. He simply acted, because in that moment, my survival mattered more to him than his own. The chamber was silent. Even the Vorn had stopped shifting in their seats. "The Aethery are the oldest species in this room," Lyris continued. "We have survived for longer than most of you can imagine. We have accumulated wisdom and knowledge across 40,000 years. And in all that time, We have forgotten something essential. She looked at the ethery delegation, her own people, watching her with expressions that ranged from confusion to disapproval. We have forgotten how to sacrifice. We have forgotten that some things are worth dying for. We have become so focused on preserving our long lives that we have stopped truly living them. A Vorn representative stood up. His voice was rough and aggressive, as always. Pretty words, Ambassador. But what is your point? The archive is destroyed. The mission was a failure, was it? Lyris met his eyes without flinching. I entered that vault believing that humans were insignificant. I left understanding that they possess something we have lost. Something you have never had. And what is that? Heart. She let the word hang in the air. The willingness to give everything for another. The courage to act without certainty. The strength to care about something more than your own survival. She turned back to the full council. My recommendation is simple. Increase human integration in all high-risk operations. Not because they are expendable, but because they are extraordinary. Their capacity for sacrifice is not a weakness. It is the greatest strength I have ever witnessed. The council debated for 3 hours. Some agreed with her immediately. Others argued that humans were too unpredictable, too emotional, too short-lived to be trusted with important missions. The Vorn, predictably, opposed anything that might increase human influence. In the end, the vote was close. But Lyris's recommendation passed. After the session ended, she found Marcus waiting outside the chamber. He was leaning against a wall, wearing civilian clothes instead of his combat armor. The scars from his injuries were visible on his arms and neck, white lines against his dark skin. He would carry those marks forever. I heard you made quite a speech, he said. You were listening? The whole galaxy was listening, Ambassador. You basically told everyone that humans are the best thing since faster-than-light travel. Lyris laughed. It was a strange sensation. She had not laughed in centuries. I told them the truth. Nothing more. They walked together through the corridors of the council building. Other diplomats and representatives passed them, some nodding in recognition, others staring with curiosity. An ethery ambassador walking side by side with a human soldier was an unusual sight. What happens now? Marcus asked. You are being reassigned. The council has approved my request for permanent security detail. Marcus stopped walking. Wait, you requested me specifically? Of course. She turned to face him. You saved my life. More than that, you changed my understanding of what life means. I do not intend to let you out of my sight. He stared at her for a moment, then shook his head with a small smile. You know, most people just send a thank you card. I am not most people. They continued walking. Outside the building, a transport was waiting to take them to their next assignment. Another dead world, another ancient vault, another mission that might kill them both. But this time, things would be different. I have a question, Lyris said as they approached the transport. Earlier, you said that humans choose what matters and then fight for it. What matters to you, Marcus Cole? He considered the question for a long moment. My grandmother used to say that what matters isn't what you have, it's what you're willing to give up. For me, that's always been the people I protect. Their lives matter more than mine. But why? Why would you value others above yourself? Marcus smiled. It was the same tired, genuine smile she had seen in the medical bay. Because someone has to? Because if nobody is willing to sacrifice, then nothing good survives. The universe is full of things that want to destroy what we've built. The only way to stop them is to care more than they do. Lyris thought about this as they boarded the transport. The ethery had built their civilization on caution and calculation. They had survived by avoiding risk, by protecting their long lives above all else. They had accumulated knowledge and power across 40 millennia, but they had lost something along the way. They had forgotten that survival was not the same as living. They had forgotten that some things were worth dying for. Humans had not forgotten. Perhaps they never would. The transport left it off, carrying them toward their next mission. Lyris watched the council building shrink below them, then turned to look at Marcus. He was staring out the window, his scarred hands folded in his lap, his expression thoughtful. "I have been alive for 40,000 years," she said, "and I have never met anyone like you." Marcus glanced at her. "Is that a compliment?" "Yes." She placed her crystalline hand over his scarred one. "It is the highest compliment I know how to give." They flew in silence for a while. Below them, the galaxy spread out in all directions, filled with dangers and wonders and secrets waiting to be discovered. Somewhere out there, the Vorn were still searching for precursor weapons. Somewhere out there, other species were rising and falling, building and destroying, living and dying. And somewhere in the middle of it all, one human and one ethery were flying toward the unknown together. "You know," Marcus said eventually, "when I first met you, I thought you were the most arrogant person I'd ever encountered." Lyris nodded. "I was. What changed?" She thought about the question. She thought about the dark chamber beneath HFY, about the containment field sealing her inside, about Marcus running toward her instead of away. She thought about the blood on the floor, the cracks in her crystal, the moment when she had decided that his life mattered more than her own. "You showed me what it means to be brave," she said. "Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. You showed me that a short life lived with purpose and love is worth more than a long life lived in fear." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed softly and shook his head. "My grandmother would have liked you, Ambassador." "Please," she said. "Call me Lyris." He smiled. "Lyris it is." The transport carried them into the darkness between stars. Ahead, another dead world waited, another vault full of secrets and dangers. But for the first time in 40,000 years, Lyris Velthon was not afraid. She had learned, from a human soldier with scarred hands and a gentle heart, that there were things in the universe worth dying for, and that lesson she knew would stay with her forever.